Nirup Jayant. His course material is physical planning. The page on the work syllabus is page 63.
Hold on. Let me. Where is that? Where is the USB?
To be here today. Planning is a subject that I find a bit of a challenge, especially when teaching here in the 7th semester. It's not something that children have got used to yet. It's a scale they're completely uncomfortable with. The largest architectural project they've done is still only a single building in the 6th semester, or maybe it's a group of buildings that are very closely associated. So grasping this concept of planning is something that they are very unable to do. And in class, when even the project for the 7th semester is quite an extensive sized project. And it's a mixed use typically with a lot of infrastructure components in it. And when you give them that level of a project, they're unable to understand the scale of buildings, understand how to go about solving that problem. And I think part of that is part of our responsibility in this case is to also control and deliver the syllabus to them in such a way that they're still familiar with an architectural scale and concept when you talk about planning to them. Currently the program is quite theory focused. There's a lot of history, planning theory, focus on growth of settlements, and your usual planning techniques, regional planning, urban renewal, various issues that come up with it. But kind of read it like you're reading a history book. What I'm suggesting is we kind of take in a lot of the various concepts that many of you have talked about today, about integrating across time and space, and also across various topics, and bringing them to understand it in a tactful manner. And that comes only through application, not necessarily through just accumulation of knowledge. And there is data collection, analysis, problem comprehension that's there in the current approach. But for them to be able to get to problem solving, activities and application is an essential part of that process. And like Sir was saying, the timeline is 16 weeks, and you're suddenly going from designing single buildings to thinking about entire cities. So what I'm basically thinking is today, at the same time, across India, we're talking about rural infrastructure, connectivity and transportation in terms of metros, systems and all of that, basic amenities for slum dwellers, urban centers, knowledge communities, urban growth, IT campuses and SEZ'S, integrated townships, so many different conflicting things that are not necessarily associated with each other. We have work that, if you really look at it, is something that would have been done 2,000 years ago. We're repeating it today because we're relocating and, tribal populations that have been relocated because of a dam or mining industries and things like that. We're doing those kinds of projects. At the same time, we're getting nomadic people to settle down for the first time. So from there all the way to an integrated campus or townships, which are 5,000 acres in size, all of those projects are happening at the same time. What took 400 years to do in the West, we're trying to accomplish in 25 years. We don't have the knowledge or the wherewithal to even deliver that to them. In fact, we have to look all around the world for these examples, and we have to show them how they can learn 400 years of work and accomplish it in 25 at the same time. We also have to be able to realize all the problems that are there over 400 years are all happening here at the same time. So at any given point in time, you may be working on projects that are at the scale of a village. You're doing a primary healthcare center or something like that, and at the same time you're also doing an integrated township for I don't know how many 1,000 houses on the other side for an IT SEZ. So time and age also have started to matter a lot when you talk about planning. Infrastructure has to be planned for various timelines, for various populations. And the population age factor has also come back to bite a lot of planning in the US, in Japan, in Germany, in various places. And it's all the latest findings show that Kerala is the first state in India to have an aging population, and Tamilnadu is going to follow suit quite soon after that. So I kind of broke this down into various modules. It's all related to scale, starting from the smallest sort of settlement, urban settlement there is, moving on to the largest of them, and then finally bridging it back to something they are comfortable with and something they are going to actually experience firsthand when they go into practice. So the first one is you're talking about why people settle down, why urban settlements started happening. It is nomadic tribes began to settle down, territorial definition happened, division of labor led to that, settlement happened, and ownership of land happened for the first time. And that itself is a component that we have to study carefully, because there are places in the world like China where ownership of land is still only partially allowed. And there are ownership, there is lease, there is various other forms of that itself that again lead back into planning. The driving force at this stage is still basically security, farming, cattle, storage, and definition of an ownership concept. And you're beginning to, at this stage, just understand the need for a human settlement, and you refer back to Indus Valley civilization, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Rome, and various of these civilizations for ideas on how these were sorted out in those times. And you're also learning about the first sort of formal settlements in Indian tradition. The Vedic and Dravidian towns, the idea of Chanakya, his Arthashastra, some of the Dravidian temple towns, and a few of those things. This spans various timelines, but you're talking about the same issues at that level. You're still at a very village and a small town level, and that's what you're trying to get them to do. And for every one of these modules, there's an activity and a goal associated with it. The activity here would be to design a tribal settlement or something like that, and the goal of it is to understand the simple things like formation of streets, proximity to water, arable land, sewage removal, grain storage, various simple activities that happen in a settlement of that size, and how do you implement it and plan for it. Moving on to the next week, you're looking at fortified towns, which was sort of the next sequential development that happened. At this time, you're basically learning to understand about security, defense, and you're also understanding the various urban design elements that came to be as part of that language, and how to use that in architecture, while also understanding how strongly it defines a planning module. In the next week, you go on to understand urban design in public spaces. This came about after people settled down, became comfortable. So you have the first stage where you're just settling down, second stage where you're protecting yourself and you're focused on the defense, and the third stage is once you're comfortable, what do you do? That's when you start understanding that taking urban design and planning to the next level. You're understanding that you're going from providing a facility to making it an enhanced experience. Understanding urban design as part of a process of planning, and how that influences things like street hierarchy, plazas, parks, urban spaces, infrastructure, signage, streetscape, skylines, how all of these things come together to form an urban space. The next is, when do the problems come in? And this is sort of also the sequence in which it really happened in the West. Industrial Revolution came after Renaissance. And essentially you have the same situation here. You start with basically the ancient Indian history, where you have Chanakya's Arthashastra, which delineates zoning regulations for the first time anywhere in the world. And when you look at it, you read it today as community differentiation and all that, but the honest truth about that is there was no idea of a land value system at that time. So when you talk about Chanakya's Arthashastra and zoning regulations, you're talking about a pure planning solution at that point. You also understand that after that, Western planning in medieval Europe, they had the industrialization, they had the Fire of London and various other events that led to the new plan of London. It also generated the idea of a land value system, which gave preferential pricing to greener and non-polluted areas. This was something that came about as a result of Industrial Revolution, as a matter of fact. Because before that, even in the West, it was pretty much fiefdoms, and you did not have something called a land value system. So this was sort of an urban construct that developed in the Middle Ages, in the Industrial Revolution period. And that's something that came to India and later influenced how communities prospered in India. So having these 2 points here really helps define how we perceive land today and why something is better than another. How greener environments and non-polluted areas really do matter. And when you look at today's situation in slums and migrant labor colonies across India, you will have the same problems that were faced at the time of Industrial Revolution in the West. So you're almost sort of bridging that gap again. And then when you look at what Ebenezer Howard has done, his theories and Corbusier's theories, you have this connect back to reality when you understand how you can actually implement some of these things and where you would really need to see that implemented. It's also the stage at which they begin to understand the need for urban infrastructure in terms of how railways, roads, sanitation systems, and all of that really begin to define what are needed in an urban settlement. This is a part 2 of the Industrial Revolution segment. This is when you finally start having a defined industrial area. You have the fire of Chicago, which kind of drove the Burnham Plan in the US. You also have the emergence of suburbia, for which Clarenstein's examples are cited in the syllabus. And you also have to kind of reflect on how Stalin's idea of moving industry away from the cities in USSR kind of inspired Nehru to take on that and implement it in India. Because Nehru's goal was not to move it away. His aim was to first set it up, and he wanted to take the industry where the people were so that they get jobs. And that was sort of what you really started doing. You started creating employment throughout India, and some best examples are Jamshedpur and Jamnagar. And all of these kind of led to the emergence of control regulations. So this is when they begin to understand why you need control regulations and how do you implement them. DCR, CPCB, EPA, LEED, GRIHA, various stages of evolution and types of control regulations that we have today. And this is when the students begin to understand climatic factors and quality of life and how that influences urban planning and design. This module is the clean canvas module. This is when you start from scratch. It's not history that you're stuck with, but when you start from scratch, what do you do? One of the biggest starting from scratch situations that's been there is the Thomas Jefferson plan for finding America after the Louisiana Purchase. And that really laid the foundation for what America is today. The grid pattern that defines America is pretty much something that an architect who became a president came up with. So it's something that we should sort of begin that with. And part of the clean canvas is also something that came about as a result of emerging democracies. And so a lot of people were figuring this out, and colonial experiments were conducted all over India, part of which was Patrick Geddes' Town and Country Planning Act for Chennai and Mumbai. And then you have Lutyens' Delhi, where they hope to implement a lot of what they felt they learned from Patrick Geddes' thinking. And then as a continuation of that, in India we also have some of the most well-known examples of new cities, Chandigarh and Bhubaneswar, and how this applies today. So you still have a lot of these being done. Almaty is being built, Ranchi is being built as we speak, and more are being proposed in terms of capital cities. And the biggest challenge here is what you have to recognize is that there are no people here. You have to build a community for people that you're unfamiliar with, that don't exist today, that are going to come from somewhere else. So how do you plan for that? That is a very challenging socio-economic problem. But hopefully by this time they have enough depth of knowledge to begin to start understanding that. And then you have the global city, the metropolis. This is where you begin to learn the emergence of city structure. You start looking at proper cities that are there today. The central business districts, suburbs, inner city areas, remote centers. And you also understand city form and growth patterns and types of cities. You look at densification and need for urban transit. You start understanding what that is and why that begins to play a very important role in a place where the driving force is employment generation, establishment of industry, and creation of education and services. The connected cities. This is when you reach the scale of megalopolises. These are basically urban agglomerations. And there are various examples, and this is almost like a case study week for them, where they begin to understand the importance of public infrastructure and how one particular infrastructure can generate interest and spread of urban development across borders, across rivers, across various different examples. So I've just listed a few. Delhi NCR, Johor Bahru, Singapore, Philadelphia, Washington, Baltimore, even Bangalore and Hosur. And these are examples they learn from, because you have to understand that you're talking about very expensive infrastructure like airports, ports, that you can only build in certain locations at certain costs. And sometimes even if it's across an international border, people are willing to benefit from it and use it across that line. This is sort of coming to a conclusion now. You're talking about time and cities. You're talking about change. You're talking about understanding what urban renewal is, but not necessarily only that. There's lots of different things that are happening. All of them are very different from each other. You have the case of Detroit, where basically you have a city in decay. You have the city of Chennai, which is taking over from Detroit. But unfortunately, you have a very different situation there. You're building a new city, and it's a fully industrial development, and you're not sure how it's going to succeed. You have the case of Bangalore, where we exploded from a 2 million size city to a 6 million size city in a matter of 10 to 12 years. And then the case of Delhi, where it's a lone urban center for almost 1,000 miles, where the other states have just been unable to develop enough infrastructure and have instead built cities just next to it, the capital, to kind of tag along for those resources. And then you also have the actual idea of urban renewal, which London has had in maybe the last 20 years, a huge relook at how it goes about its business. And Chicago, from an industrial town to an education and services based economy. This is basically the sort of almost final module where you're bridging the gap. Now you've learned a lot of theory. How do you actually apply it, and what are you actually going to do with it? How do you bring it down to your project? So this is where I think you start understanding the scale gap that we're having in India. You're looking at projects that are 25, 30 acres, 40 acres in size, which they're going to actually be working on once they graduate, or probably for their own thesis, which is the semester after this. So I think understanding and doing case studies of large urban projects gives them that feel, and they also begin to be able to actually they're able to experiment at that scale with an architectural knowledge and background, but also be able to implement some of their urban planning thoughts. And the final idea is you have 2 weeks of project work, and all of this project or activity that I'm thinking of happens in class, during class hours. It's not a homework assignment or a project at home. It's more to generate discussion, it's more to generate a debate within the class and make them come up with different solutions for different locations. And that's pretty much all you're looking for. You're not looking to do a huge presentation out of this. And the key here is they also have to understand what is the future of planning. What happens when you have a fully integrated live, work, play, shop, learn, and stay environment where everybody is in one place. You don't need to go anywhere. Everything comes to you, you order online. What are you going to do at that time? Are you going to be able to plan for that kind of a situation? So that's pretty much the outline.
Thanks.